Ayin Beis, Volume 1, Chapter 105, page 202, Reish Beis. 202, page 202, Chapter Kufay. So middle of, and this is the Discourse 27, Ve'evan Azay's Pasha tells us. He's beginning the third explanation in Sfiras. With the first two explanations, Sfira from the word Misper, number, discussed at length. Then came Sfira from the word Sipur, telling a story, narrative, telling the story of the finite and of the infinite, story of the energies, whereas Misper is more the story of the containers, of the structure of existence, and what lies behind the structure. Sipur goes deeper into the story of the energies, of what the energies within existence, and higher than the containers, all the way to the Bligvul itself, to the root of the structure, and then Bligvul itself. That would be, I think, the concise summary of that. And now he comes to the third Pirush, which is Behirus, which we'll see how exactly he defines Behirus, but we've determined Behirus means obviously brilliance, shining, glowing, clarity. Probably it's all of the above. So, began chapter Kuf Dalet explaining the difference. I should also put all this into larger context. All this, Sfiras, all began as an explanation. How do you have Sfiras in transcendence, in Makifim, in Nigulim? Which in turn was a follow-up of a whole discussion of the difference between Makif and Pnimi. And which in turn is the whole explanation of what exactly is immanent energy, which is the structure of existence, to explain what Kesed is. So in chapter Kuf Dalet, in chapter 104, he's been discussing, he began by saying that this comes to distinguish between Kalim and Levushim, between containers and garments, and that the containers do not conceal. They're like a clear glass that allows the energy to flow through. Like when you look at a glass, you see the light that comes through it. And then you have, as he speaks, garments that do conceal. And he explained that in garments itself, you have two types of garments. You have garments that are connected, there are garments that are detached. He started speaking the Pasuk Eliyahu that levushim are tikunim. What's a tikkun? Takshitim, like jewelry. Let me check this. Like jewelry. So like jewelry, it beautifies. It's not a concealer. It's a beautifier, which means it reveals the person's beauty and so on. When it comes to regular garments, main garment is conceals from something outside of it. I'm just summing this up. Either other people, or from weather, cold, and other factors that a person would conceal themselves from. Now, the levushim itself, it's not just completely concealed. There is levushim, they are relative to different parts of the body. There's levushim harosh, garments that you put on the head for the body and for the feet, like shoes. And he's explained how each one fits as a commensurate to its part of the body and to the part of the function that it has, like, for example, the feet that protect it from walking on dirt, on mud, and so on. So you have thicker garments than as opposed to the more subtle garments in the higher parts of the body. But the bottom line is that it's all about something outside of you, not within you. It's not about revealing, it's about protecting from covering up or protecting from something outside of you. Another Marisha, before the sin, before the Chet, did not need garments, because he himself was not yet in a state of being outside. And he was separate from anything that was outside. He was just completely, so-called, I would say, insulated.
Because the weather was a perfect Sunday.
Yep. Well, that part of the country, the world, is the southeastern Iraq. The weather is usually pretty warm. After the Chet, he needed to have the Vushim HaMastirim. Then he goes and finally says the last part is all about the body. The goof of a human being is also considered a levush, like he brings from the Pasuk, Boshet al Bisheni. But this is a levush that reveals. It's a garment that reveals, not conceals. Because the whole purpose of the body and it's the organs and the limbs, is revealing the faculties that would be on their own concealed. If you don't have a physical eye, you would have the power of vision, but you couldn't see physical things. You have the same thing with the ears, same thing with other parts of the body. The soul does have the power to see and hear, as he said, the chruzim. So he said that's also through a lavush. It's also through a garment, except it's a much more subtle garment. It's the garments of the nefesh, how it is in its source, not as it comes down to earth. As he explained before, that for Eris to be revealed, you need to have containers. Like a flame cannot be grounded, won't burn unless it has a keli hanechas, dover hanechas, a wick on which to contain it and grasp it. Okay. So it also has a lavush, the neshama l'mayla. It's not like the malachim have gufim from the sadakim, but neshamas don't have a body, but they have a lavush. And when neshama comes down, the physical body becomes its so-called filter or channel to be able to see, and especially to see physical things. To be able to see a physical thing, you need a physical container. Spiritual thing can't see a spiritual thing. Cannot see something that's physical. So it's the physical container that becomes the ability to... Well, all this shows us that the guf is also a lavush, but it's a lavush that's connected and reveals. This is galus eda nefesh alifa al yodei. V'zel lavush hamiyuchad shemisachad im hanefesh hamagala esei. I'm reading the last lines of the chapter. This is the lavush hamiyuchad. It's a lavush that's attached, not a lavush. For example, garments, actual garments. You take off, you put them on, you undress yourself, you dress and undress, and you hang them up. And you can do that any time. A guf is with you all the time, so it's a guf miyuchad, so it reveals. And that's how it functions as well. So now we continue. That's exactly where he left off. And all this is, remember, in the context of explaining the difference in kelim and levushim, all to explain the meaning of spheres from the word behiras. V'hinei kamei begashmis, chapter Kufay 105. V'hinei now kamei begashmis levushay guf. Just like physically, levushay guf, the garments of the body, hen lechasis. Well, lehastir, they're to cover and to conceal. Well, levushay guf legales. So levushay gufar, we're talking about the garments that cover the body. That they come to cover and conceal. Levush haguf, and the body itself, the body that's a levush. No, it's all levushim. Let's put it this way: the neshama, that's called the neshama the ayir. Neshama is placed inside of a body. The body has organs and limbs, and then you put clothing onto the body. It's like another layer of levush, so to speak. But there's a big difference. The levushim that go on the body are conceal, cover and conceal, like he said before, from weather or from other people. The levush of the guf is always meyuch. That's a levush hanifrit, separate. And the levush haguf is always connected to the body, and its role is to reveal. It's also levush. We'll see where he's going with this. Kamei kain yuvin. We'll see. Kamei kain yuvin she's based min levushim hanal beruchnis hanefesh. Shein kerches hanefesh. Well, levushim the machshava diberamais. I'm sorry, shein kerch. Sorry, you have to read like this. Kamei kain. This example, this physical reality, is also similar to this. There's two types of levushim beruchnis hanefesh. In the spirit of the nefesh, just like begashmis, he said, you have these two types of garments, so to speak. One that is an outer garment that conceals, that is a separate garment. Another is the body, that is the garment that reveals. Same thing in ruchnis hanefesh. What are the two? Shein keches hanefesh, that's the faculties of the soul, of the spirit. Ulevushim, ulevusheha, actually. The machshava dibra ma'isa. So here too we have the nefesh itself. But then we have the keches hanefesh, the faculties of the soul, and we have the garments of their garments. Machshava dibra ma'isa. This is already the beginning of Tanya. You want to learn Tanya, so what do we know? Just to say what it says in Tanya, very simply. It says there's a neshama. The nefesh is made up of 10 keches. Those 10 keches are 10 key faculties. Chachma, bina, das, chesed, gura, teferes, netzach, yesed, malchus. Then there's 3 levushim. Garments are expressors. There's only 3 ways you can express yourself. Either you think, consciously think about something. So it could be a machshava. Dibur is the second way you express to others. And maisa is through creating something. Or putting it down that's like more permanent, outside of you. It's the only 3 ways a person can express himself. Chachma, bina, das, through malchus are all essentially latent faculties. What does that mean? They're just there. If you don't have machshava, dibur, and maisa, they're like the millions of ideas in your brain, and you're not even conscious of it. Machshava means the active process of reaching into your hard drive, so to speak, and consciously thinking about it. And you can't think about two things at once, but you could have millions of ideas in your mind at once. So the difference in Chochmah Bina Das, which one of the things they should be explaining as soon as we begin learning it, is the faculties themselves. So the faculties themselves are like powers. But the levush is what gives it tangible shape and form. You can have a lot of ideas and not say them to anybody. That doesn't mean you don't have. You can have feelings that you don't express. So everyone from Chochmah to Malchus needs machshava dibur ma'aseh. It's essentially its instrument of expression. To put it in simple English, it's expressive. That's the levushim. But what he's saying here, obviously, is that there's two levels. There's also the keiches themselves. Technically, are also levushim compared to the soul, but they're a very different type of levushim.
Like the levushim of the guf.
Right, exactly. That's exactly what he's saying. So let's read it. There you go. Mind and emotions, intellect and emotions, that's not etzem hanefesh, that's not the core of the soul. We discussed this earlier. Remember we spoke of keches atzmin. And proof to this is we see in the keches shinuyim mekatlas hagadlus. There's maturity, less immaturity, and maturity. You see, a person grows in their faculties. We learned this earlier also. With days, the days speak. With the days you learn to speak. With many years, you become informed with wisdom. So what do we see from this? When a child or a less mature person, the mind and the emotions are less mature, less developed, smaller. That's what he means. And as he matures and grows, his seichel grows as well. And also his emotions are in things that are relatively gdei erech, meaning in quality they're greater things. Interesting, he doesn't say the midas grow, as he says by seichel. He says the midas are in things that are more valuable. Let me explain what that means. But bottom line is coming to prove that it's not an etzem hanefesh, because etzem hanefesh gives a life of a baby and the life of the oldest person is the same life force. So life is equal. What changes are the keiches. So you can't say the keiches are etzem hanefesh. That's what he's leading to. But let me just explain the difference. The mind matures is very clear. There's no question that a person's mind matures. You see this. You see how you're able to control yourself as you get older. A child is purely emotional. You can't tell a child don't cry if you're hungry. A baby. As the child grows, you could see intelligence begins to emerge. Doesn't mean the child is born with intelligence, but it's not an active force. Emotions, on the other hand, you could say, one second, a child is emotional from day one. So the emotions actually grow. So we talked about this. In Aveda, you can make them grow, but they don't just grow on their own. It's the meichin that trains them. So you can have a 30, 40-year-old and be just the same tantrum as a 2-year-old. They're just smart enough to hide it. And some are not even smart enough to do that. In other words, but inside they can be the same narishkeiten. You see road rage. You see people who go crazy about some stupid thing. So technically, emotions don't really mature. What happens is the mind matures, and the mind trains the emotions to behave, to learn, to channel them. Like people who are, for example, playing poker or in business and so on. You learn to monitor and to gauge and what's the word. Restrain your emotions in the stock market, not to get crazy, these things. But emotionally, a person is emotional. So what he's saying is that basically, you see that Shinei HaLashon is b'dvarim gdei erech. You can, for example, a child gets excited, you give a child a little toy, the child gets down on the ground and start playing with it, whole passion. You give that to a 15-year-old, he won't. Or a 10-year-old, they want something else. So they have their toys, they're a little more. You go to a 20-year-old who knows how to read a book, it may be a book. You go to a person who's a little more spiritual, maybe something spiritual. They're all excited. They're all emotionally excited about what they're thinking. What's the difference between one and another? The object of what they want is different. The excitement can be very equal. And a tzaddik gets excited about a mitzvah, gets excited about ruchnis. He's not less excited. In other words, excitement per se and emotions is not a bad thing. It depends what you get emotional about. So Nefesh Abamis gets emotional about the things that are selfish and desires and taivas and so on. But a person who gets excited by reading a book, or a person who gets excited by meeting someone they haven't seen in a long time, or a father and a child, a parent and a child, or any other more spiritual. So, but the change is not that the emotion per se changed, it's still chesed, you still love, This one's love is directed towards some inferior thing, and this one's love is directed toward a very spiritual thing. The truth is, we'll learn, and we have learned, that the midas actually also grow like tzemeach, but they need the chinuch of the mind. You can't grow without the chinuch. So basically, that's why I'm just being medayik. That's why he said here he said k'sheyigdel nizgadel sichle. By midaisav, he doesn't say nizgadel midaisav. Even though technically it is, but it's really more specifically that the bedvarim hagdelia erech. His midas are in things that are,
It's not the gavra, it's the
yeah. The correct. The gavra also will change with enough training, because that's why you have teva hergel nasa teva. That's the key, that you work on it enough. It's like habits. You could, if a person trains enough times, their emotions can also be redirected. So so in the beginning, and willpower, the will and the brain to want. For example,
he's not using his brain, so the emotions are the same like a child.
Exactly, or a shikr. Yeah. Or you provoke somebody strong enough, suddenly they lose their seichel. That's why you have the difference in a chacham betzim kechachmasa. There are people who have seichel, but push comes to shove, their emotions come back. You touch them with a daf design, and suddenly they're not that mature. You see this all the time. You see it by din teres. Normal people, so a bissel gelt, their whole personality changes. The anger, the emotions. I mean, it's horrible to see. The nochi dimension is got a dimension. That's it. That's how it is. Yeah. So anyway, but all this is coming to tell us about the keiches that are not. So what's he saying? Okay, so this is proof. This indicates that they're not atzmim. The whole etzem ain't mishtana. The rule is an etzem doesn't change. See, the concept of change, of shifts, of growth, and so on, you don't speak in an etzem. You speak in hispastus. Something that extends, you speak like that. You speak in a core force that's a source, basically. There's no changes. How much it's emitting or transmitting, that's where there's a change. This is true in almost every area of life, even in energy sources. Even though, yes, it's true that energy needs a fuel, but the source in general, a fundamental core source is usually a non-changeable entity. But here, of course, we're talking in Elikus. In other words, the soul doesn't get weaker in a 100-year-old person than it is in a 1-year-old child. What's weaker is that the body has worn down, so it cannot bring in. But that soul is not like ran out of energy. So a person has less energy. Forget about an adult. Let's talk about forget about an older person, a younger person. You run long enough, you get exhausted. What happened? Your soul got tired. Your body has used its limit. It went to its limit.
How can we prove that that's the case?
I just gave an example because here's an example. Look,
maybe it's a soul that
so I just told you. Let's take a 20-year-old who's very well shaped. He runs for 10 miles and then he gets tired.
Maybe the soul got tired.
Huh? So why when he gets refreshed, when his body slows down, he stops, he can go right back to that? The energy is there. I mean, I don't know how you can make that argument that it's the soul. A soul is an energy force. What difference does it make? Why do we condition our body? When we exercise, you're exercising the soul or the body. If you say, let's say, God forbid, a person's hand got paralyzed, then they start working with it. You say the soul got paralyzed. Why don't you argue the soul? It's clear that it's the body, because when you work with exercising the hand gets stronger, and then the soul's energy can flow back into it. I don't think anyone, even the biggest skeptic, would say otherwise.
I'm giving back my soul.
But I'm not talking about night.
The soul should get refreshed, and then in the morning it comes back refreshed.
First of all, one second, with all due respect, I don't think it's the soul. The soul is going back to its source for. You're talking using faith as a proof. I'm using physical. I just told you. Take a person whose hand, God, something happened to the hand. You don't say it happened to the soul. You say the soul was moved. Look, one of the proofs Chassidus gives, for example, 2 blind people will give birth to a seeing-eye child. It's proof that the Kriyach Hariyah is all right. It's the physical. You could give many proofs for this. It's not. I mean, you could. I don't think even if you bend backwards, you can't really. I mean, how could you make an argument that it's the soul? No way. Now you could say there are illnesses. We learned earlier, mania, illnesses that affect the nerves, not the actual. In other words, your hand may be intact. Now yours, a person's hand may be intact, and the problem is that the mind is not speaking to it. In other words, the nerves. But that again is a physical thing. I mean, to me it makes total sense. It's like the breakdown of a machine part, of a body part, for sure. I mean, look, a person could actions that can say, look, if something happens to your body, something happens to your soul, and it's together. And then when you fix the body, automatically the soul's also being fixed. But no, I would not say that. No. You can have a corpse, the body's intact. It could be probably even more intact than another person who's alive, and the soul's all gone. It's gone. That's it. You could have, in other words, a healthy body part. The soul is gone. You could have an unhealthy body part, and.
What does it mean that pain?
Yeah, I was going to say.
But so what I said makes sense or not?
Yeah.
So we spazich just to spazich or what?
No, just want to know what that means. So that particular.
What's the show? What word? It doesn't mean begashmis. It means because the Eibush to reveal a good body. So it's nishmat. Because God wants a good body, so you should be able to serve Hashem. So if a person, for example, hurts their body, they're hurting God's nechosim. Therefore, they're hurting the ability to do aveda. Why does it say that Rambam says that you should have parnasa? That's in order that you should be able to menuchas hanefesh. Health is important for the soul to be able to, because if the soul doesn't manifest, then the soul can't do its job. That's what it means there. For sure, that's what it means.
Okay.
And if you want to go all the way, why don't you ask me what the Zohar says? How's it stand with that? Tukva de nishmasa is chulsha de gufa, and chulsha de gufa is tukva de nishmasa. It's the exact opposite. The weaker the body, the stronger the soul. The stronger the body, the weaker the soul. So that's Mama's other extreme. No, I'm saying so, because clearly there's also there. So the answer to the tivuch within that is a whole different discussion. That's because the kavana is guf. There he's talking about the taivus of the guf. The more powerful your body is, the less your soul can speak. But then there's another part, to go mutilate yourself, or yisurim, or tainesim, segufim. That's what the Maggid is talking about. The shit of Chassidus, that you're not supposed to hurt your body. Those that did, well, that was their kavanah. They wanted to break the taivus. Yeah, but bottom line is a weak person cannot serve well. That's what it means. So it's here we're talking about something else completely. Al Kaponim saying like this. So Zeira she'enu atzim b'chol etzim enu mishtana. V'agam sha'ashinu hu mitzad hakelim ve'ivra guf. He's asking a question now. It's not the keiches that change. Huh?
It's a very good question.
Right. V'agam sha'ashinu mitzad hakelim ve'ivra guf. The shinui that changes in growth and maturity is mitzad hakelim. The containers and the limbs of the body changed. By a child, by a younger person, the actual container of his brain are smaller. And they're not containers to receive the energy of intelligence, the cognitive energy. And that's why the seichel is behelim. Because as I said earlier, everyone's born with a brain. You don't get a brain suddenly in the middle of your life. You have it. What's happening is, as we just said, the containers expand, so more energy flows in. It's actually asking the opposite side question, exactly the opposite. The other extreme. Huh? Right. Yeah. You were saying maybe the neshama change. He's saying even the keiches don't really.
That's what he's asking.
Well, you could then say maybe it is asking because the keiches don't change. Once again, let's see. Parentheses, the behelim yesh be'er ha-seichel ha-gadol. Gam b'katnusei. Because concealed, he has the er ha-seichel. He has the energy of seichel. Even when he's a child. It's not a pasuk. But butzin bekat v'yediyah. Butzin means drops, even as when you're young.
Small plants.
Small
plants.
Even when they're small.
You can tell already how they're going to be when they get
right. Mekatfin yediyah. Mekatfu yediyah. I'm sorry. Mekatfu yediyah. You can tell yediyah. Mekatfuhu means what? Not sure what mekatfu. I just know the teichen means that you could already discern their intelligence.
No. It's talking about small plants.
That you can tell what they're going to become. So what's mekatfu? So what's mekatfu? What's yediyah? Yediyah is.
When you're going to cut it, you're going to know how it's. You already know how it's going to be.
So mekatfu is how it's going to be. That's what it's referring to.
Katfa means when you cut it.
Oh, yediyah, you know. Okay.
You already know how.
That's the expression that.
It's going to be when you cut it.
So butz and butzins talk about small little plants. Mekat for yediyah, when you cut them, you know what they're like going to be. So the same thing with a person. I mean, this is always said by the Rabbeim or others, that great people, that when you see their childhood, you see stories, you can tell who this person is going to be. Except when there are no containers, it is concealed. By the way, there's, I think, another one there. Ayin Beis. No? Okay. Fine. Okay. Rather. And when the containers of the mind grow, expand, the energy inside that's healed, that's concealed before, is revealed. Okay, so clearly he's asking a question. He just said, you can't say the keiches. It says that the fact that we grow and our faculties grow in turn indicates that there cannot be an etzem, because the etzem doesn't change. One second, it's feeling good. So now he said Vagam, even though it's what changes is only the containers, not the keiches, he says Gam is hinimizeh gufa moving. From this itself is understood she'ena atzmi, that the faculties are not core. Ki atzmi in negele hakeli imi bekat neseh begadlus, because the atzmi is not affected. They're not affected. They're completely removed from whether the container is smaller or bigger. So in other words, yes, very nice. It's true. The faculties are there from the beginning, concealed, and they emerge. But the fact that they're impacted by the kelim, that itself is a shinui, because the etzem is not impacted by the things that grow or are smaller. Like in the actual, like I mentioned before, the bond and the connection of the etzem and nefesh, that when a child is born or when a child is conceived, so this nefesh, whatever soul goes into it, becomes now connected and is bound to this body, will not leave this body until after Me'ev Esrim Shana.
Life force, there's no difference.
He's not saying that. He's saying, now I know what he's saying. He's saying Etzem Nefesh Mugdav. It's what's one step before the life force. It means that it is in there equally. Well, let's read it. Ein negeb is a klal katnus v'gadlus haguf. Here there's no difference between whether how big or small the body is. There's a life force and that's it. See, there's two things. It says mugdeh beguf. We learned it also, that the neshama is mugdeh beguf. That's why it's not a complete mashal for Eid and Sof. All the way earlier. Not just tailored. No. I'm not talking about tailored. No, I'm not talking about tailored. I'm talking about even yechida that is not tailored is also mugdeh to this body, not to another body. Mugdeh means that even the levels of the soul that are not functioning, it's still your soul and not someone else's. So even though yechida, let's say, does not really manifest in any particular place, but it's your yechida, not someone else's. Bottom line, it's essential connection between the two. And a lower level, it's the life force that's equal. He specifically, he didn't say the chayis is the same. Maybe he will. And the reason for that is because the etzem ha-neshama, the etzem chibur, the core connection of soul and body, is not in the form of islapshus. It's not manifest er and keli. In other words, whatever enters upon when the seed is fertilized and a child begins to grow, or whatever is there in a baby, is there equally when we're adults. It's not it's not an er and keli thing. It's just connected to the soul, connected to the body. No matter what kind of body it is, no matter what. Later, it says other places, but by Chayes it says that the same soul can give life to Eg Melech HaBashan and to a cotton Shenelot.
Yes, then that's when it comes in later, right?
But that's revelations. That's not life force. And that's not even the soul. It's the core soul for sure. Not When we say in Tanya or it says in Gemara, Eibusha takes a neshama l'mayla. It says it's going to go down to this and this body. That's what we're talking here. We're not talking here now the keichus and anything. We're talking about the etzem thing that a soul is leaving its spiritual place and entering now into a body.
And that's nefesh nefesh altogether.
Everything is there. That's lower levels. We're talking just the etzem in of a neshama. A soul will attach to a body. And as I said, in a lower level, it's specific, it gives it life. Obviously, a neshama and guf is a eir and keli. But we're talking about it's not dependent on the keli. It's not dependent on its size and so on. When the fetus starts developing, there's a force that will now remain throughout the person's lifetime connected to this thing.
So even if he has a messed up goof, whatever it is, he's still going to have a pure neshama, a pure nefesh.
We're not talking about pure now. We're not talking about holy or pure.
No, but it's not going to affect it.
No. God forbid, if the body is damaged enough, the soul can't stay there. So that's death. You're talking about not short of death, yes.
It won't affect.
I didn't say it won't affect it. That's not the words we're talking about. We're not discussing that language. We're talking now.
People are invalids and stuff like that.
Yeah, this is not relevant to this. That's irrelevant. This is this pure soul inside the body. That's it. Not pure as in kedusha. We're not talking kedusha and sins now. We're talking about as a soul as life, as opposed to its faculties. In other words, the faculties are impacted. When the containers of your brain grow, that's what he's saying here. Your mind emerges more. When the other faculties, you become stronger. So there's stronger faculties. But this core element of soul force, that's equal.
So somebody who is a vegetable or in a coma or whatever like this has the same neshama like another person. It's just a matter
in this context, yeah. I mean, it doesn't change what it says here, but it's fine. Yeah. Now, however, this is interconnected, interdependent. In other words, that the reason that this core soul doesn't change from and doesn't grow or change is because it doesn't come in Eir and Keli. But he says that's dependent, but that's why it's because it's an atzmi. That's why it doesn't come in Eir and Keli. It's an atzmistic thing. It's a core type of force. Whereas the things that come in hislapshus, that do come manifest in containers, that's already a reflection. And the power of intelligence, which changes as it transmits and is revealed, commensurate to the maturity or immaturity or maturity, or you could even say the size, the volume, the quantity, the smallness or expansion of the container, that indicates that it's not an atzmi. It's only like a garment and a container to the nefesh, to the soul, to the spirit. The nefesh impacts them and through them, affects them and through them. The nefesh conceives through the power of the mind, and loves through the power of love. So the soul, in other words, is an atzmi, it's a spirit, and the instruments and the containers are like garments that become the instruments of the soul. So through through the faculty of chesed, the soul expresses. The soul becomes a loving soul. Through the koyach haseichel becomes an intelligent soul. Nevertheless, now goes the other side of this case. On one hand, it's not the etzem. On the other hand, it's a levush. But on the other hand, it's not a levush hanifred. It's not like a garment that you can just take on and take off, and that conceals. At the end of the day, it's a levush that reveals the etzem. They are attached garments. Because they're faculties of the spirit. They're not like a hammer. A hammer is also a tool. But the faculties are part of you, are an extension of the soul. They're keches nafshim, they're faculties of the soul. And they're from the personality of the soul. So what would be, for example, how would you explain the difference to somebody, the difference between your fingers and a tool, a hammer, a screwdriver, a pliers? What's the difference? So technically we always say is that usually your finger can't do certain things, so you need those tools to reach. But what's the real difference? The difference is very simple. Those tools on their own are completely inanimate. They can't do anything. It's the fingers that have to direct them. The fingers are directly connected to the nerves, to your brain, and it's an attached extension of you and your life. Is it your life force? You say your fingers are your life force? No, they're not the life force. But they're also not outside of it, meaning they're an extension. So he says, number one, they're keches nafshim. They're faculties of the soul. They're not faculties, they're not artificial intelligence. They're not someone created a machine that's copying something. It's actually your faculties. You know what, for example, the chidushim today in medicine and technology, that they're able to create, let's say, a prosthetic limb, which copies a leg or an arm. Or today even be able to create prosthetic, artificial other part of the organs, whatever it may be. Let's say a hearing aid. So a hearing aid magnifies, amplifies, can do things. They even have cochlear implants today. But at the end of the day, obviously you're creating something outside that's getting closer to, but it's still not the same thing as the original. Definitely not levushim that are outer garments. Just trying to explain here that something can be in between, an interface. That's not the core force, but it's also not a completely outer force. In other words, God could have created us like this. You come into a body, your body is one big golem, piece of clay, it's alive, but you can't do anything without instruments. For example, before the Mabel, it says that their fingers were attached. So technically, how'd they do 100 things? They couldn't write. A lot of things you can't do without fingers. So that would be. So in other words, they could have created that the body should be just a force for your life, and everything else you have to go find instruments. But that's not the case. Our body itself is an instrument. It's an instrument. Obviously, we can go and use other instruments to amplify and to reach and to dig deeper than we can dig with our hands, etc., etc. But the bottom line is that this levush hamiyuchad, that's what he's saying here. So he said two things. It's keches nafshim, then memuhus nefesh. It's keches nafshim, meaning it's not faculties that someone you buy off a shelf and say, okay, I'm going to buy something that's going to help you reach, turn on a light bulb. It's keches nafshim. These keches are straight from your nefesh, and they're also from the same personality of the nefesh, memuhus nefesh. They have the same personality. They don't have the core element of it, but they're not something outside of the nefesh. They are ultimately nafshis. They are from the personality of spirit, and therefore they're connected. They're united. They're one with it, with the soul, with the spirit. Because now he's saying, okay, one second. Maybe you could say they're miyuchad. That you could say they're shibim le'hoyu miyuchad. Yeah, you could say, one second. Maybe they're nafshim. What did I want to say? If they were separate, you could say, one second, maybe they're nafshim, and they're from the same thing of the spirit, and they're not miyuchad. Maybe the spirit, in other words, let's say, for argument's sake, your spirit is able to shoot something off that's outside of itself. Like, let's say, taking a stone, throwing a stone. The stone flying is no longer part of you, but you gave power to something outside of you. So that is a very short-term thing that will end. What he's saying is that if they were not miyuchad with the nefesh, they would not be the personality of the nefesh. For example, the power in the stone is no longer miyuchad with the nefesh, which is why it's going to very quickly dissipate and the stone will fall. So the nefesh has the power to throw something for a few yards, or whatever the amount that we can throw. But if it remained out there, it would not maintain the nefesh dika personality. Bottom line is the miyuchad is necessary for something to be an instrument that is of the same personality of the core. It has to be connected to it. It has to be attached to it. In other words, a garment, no matter what clothing you put on, a clothing can never be expressive of what as you are personally yourself. It can enhance, it can express things, a message, but it's never going to be as expressive as a faculty that comes straight out of a person. Okay, it's something like if I were to share with you some intimate secret about my life, and then you went and shared it with someone else, it's never going to be the way I said it, because I'm saying it from within me. You're already just repeating something that's already an external story. Okay. And in the faculties itself, this is specifically even more powerful in the mind, the power of the mind. That unites with the spirit. This too we learned earlier. Seichel is different than other faculties, which is a common recurrent theme in Ayin Beis, because Seichel is also the interface. Remember, Seichel is like we say Rosh Hashanah, is the central nervous system. So besides being another kayach, the kayach of the mind, as opposed, let's say, to the kayach of the midas, emotions, Seichel happens to be more expressive, reveals more of the soul than any other faculty. Like when you walk, if you only saw a person walk, you would not understand the magnitude and the power of a human soul. When you see a person think, that's what you see. A person's mind reveals the greatest, the most superior element of what makes us human. The ability to deduce, to analyze, to conceptualize, to come up with new ideas. So Seichel is very much more nafshizdik than the other keiches. Even though it's still, the point here is, see, remember there's two sides in this whole story here. One side that it's not etzem, it's not the core. The other side it's also not outer. It's just another example of the interface. All this to come to explain how the spheres are behiras. And it was not just telling a story. See, telling a story is still, you're the storyteller, there's a story, and there's the listener. Here, it's getting far closer. The Kalim and the Eris are becoming now one. That's really where he's going with this. As opposed to just telling the story of the Eris, and that's what's higher than the Eir. That's where he's going, that it's a type of transparency. That's I think the transparent may be the most correct word for Behiris maybe. But like it's a glowing. You see, things like this, Behiris goes like if it's a glass if there's a light coming through, then the transparent, the clear light, the clear becomes brilliant. If there's nothing coming through, it's clear and transparent, but there's nothing coming through. Here we're talking about kalim that are becoming transparent channels for the soul's expression, for the Eiris expression. That's where he's going. Okay, yeah, I think that's the idea. Yeah. Are there things that are translucent and not transparent?
Yeah, sure.
Like what?
Put a piece of wax paper on your window. You can't see, but you can get the light.
But it will diminish it a bit.
Of course.
So translucent. And opaque is even more. Nothing comes through. But then you have the levels. You have when you go to any hotel, you have the curtain that lets the light in, then the curtain that just turns the whole place into one dark cave.
Or if the window's tinted or foggy or whatever it is.
Okay, so that's levels of
shades.
Okay, this is important to know for the parsois and the mesachim and the havdelim and the havsteidim. Sach madregas.
Translucent is usually mashal.
That would be good on YouTube. We'll do like this. We'll make a bunch of things like that, examples, and say this is a parsa, this is a masal, this is a tzimtzum, this is a sfira. They have English, huh?
Lexicon.
Yeah, that would be like a lexicon, but also it would show you levels of how Eir gets more or less revealed.
Usually translucent is a mashal and kupas noga.
For klipas noga as opposed to shal klipas meh. So it would be like not like a hard shell like a nut, but more like a soft shell like a grape.
Something can come through.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No. I you mean the translation? That's good. Yeah.
Glow. It's not the actual thing. It's just a glow.
Well, you have it like whether it's olives or grapes. Those definitely have the most. They call them dak. Oid. They're the most subtle. The skin is very, very. In some places you can even eat the skin. In some places it's completely hard. Like an orange is in between. Malut is, there's different levels. Yeah. Okay, so bottom line is, that's where he's going here. She said, so there's just this should be like a new paragraph, so to speak. He's going in this, especially the keich haseichel, shemisachid im nefesh, that unites with the soul to the extent that the nefesh is called al shmoi. You say a nefesh hamaskelas. You don't say this on other things. You don't say, for example, a nefesh hagvura, hagibir. Even though he did say before nefesh hamischasid. Keich haseichel umischasid. Okay, no, but you don't say nefesh hamaskelas. In other words, I think a good way to explain this is, you have, for example, you have adjectives. You all know what an adjective is? An adjective describes a noun. An adverb describes a verb. It's like a shem tayr. So adjective would say, let's say, the sun is a noun. A red sun, a yellow sun is a adjective. Say a table, a long table is an adjective. So you could have an adjective that is very distant from the noun, like you say, if I said a flying table, you right away know something's weird going on because tables don't fly. But if I say a stable table, it's far more fitting. So there's adjectives that are very much directly. It's not the table, and the stability of the table is not the same thing, because you could have a table that's not stable. But the adjective is very aligned with what the entity is. I just came up with some examples. They're probably better examples. So you see nefesh hamaskeles. So the nefesh is not seichel. But you can say nefesh hamaskeles, you're saying something that's very close to describing what is a nefesh. It's power. It's like when we say, for example, Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam. The flame of the soul of a human being is like this. It's like a flame of God. So we say what? It says before, Eish Elokah Eish Eichluhu. What are we saying? That Eish is a soul of fire. It's not a fire, but the closest approximation. If you said a soul is compared to a daimon, it's not an analogy. So he's using an example to help us understand it, because it's so close in personality. So you could say, just like a flame rises, a flame warms, a flame is oir, a flame is needs kalim, what other things? Same thing on the neshama. In other words, there are things that you can use. A descriptive word, a shem hatayr, is very close to the shem ha'etzem. That's which we actually have learned also. There's it's like a shem hamushal, for example, is not a nickname. It's just a nickname. You call somebody a name. Maybe could be they used to call him Yankel the Geller or whatever, because he did something that was Geller, or maybe his great grandfather did. But a nickname doesn't reflect or show you. It's not like an expression. It's not an expressive name. It's not a name that expresses. But in some cases, like when they said certain people, they gave them a certain title. That title actually expressed that person in a very direct way. So he's saying Nefesh Hamaskeles is a name that is, in other words, Seichel. So you say the Nefesh is a Maragel, or a Nefesh HaMahalach. Mahalach is not captures the soul's personality, so to speak. Again, it's not limited to Seichel, but it's an appropriate and a fitting title, so to speak. That's what he's saying now. So Nefesh HaMaskeles. So it's called Al Shmoi. So that's Seichel specifically. But the truth is, all the faculties are miyuchadim. Only Seichel is even more transparent. Let's put it that way. Seichel is even more than the others. Mashenkein. Okay, now we finished. I said new paragraph. This should be a new paragraph, actually. So what we covered now was that just like before in the last chapter we discussed that there's two types of garments: those that conceal and those that reveal, those that are attached, those that are detached and those that are attached. What he compared it was like outside garments you put on because of the cold or because of other people. And then there's the guf, that is an inner garment, an inside, an internal type of garment. So we now said the same thing is the keiches are like the internal. They're miyuchad, they're united, and they reveal, they don't conceal. Just for the record, doesn't mean they don't conceal. They definitely diminish. But they're not. Their power is to reveal. Their goal is to reveal, not to conceal. Whereas a garment protecting you from the cold, its whole goal is only to conceal, to protect. It's layers. So now he's saying mashenk and levushim de machshava de beramaisa mashenk and levusheha could be. That's why it doesn't matter. Mem mashenk and the levushim of the nefesh, the garments of machshava de beramaisa. Like I said, 3 garments. There's only 3 garments of expression. They are detached garments. They're not from the sug, they're not from the same cloth. They're not from the same category of the nefesh and its personality. They are like things that are separate from the nefesh. Now, of course, we'll start arguing. 1 second. What do you mean? Isn't machshava a levush hamiyuchad compared to dibur? So of course, I don't know if he's going to qualify it, but relative to dibur, yes. In the levushim itself, machshava is more miyuchad, more attached, more connected, because a person is always thinking, and dibur is not always. And ma'isa is even less detached, less attached. But compared to the keiches, machshava is a levush that is not miyuchad. He didn't say it yet, but I'm just qualifying in case the question came up in your mind. In other words, compared, for example, to the brain itself, the mind, machshav, a thought, is already an outer expression of that mind. Okay, so let's see here now. They are like a separate thing. He only said like. Obviously, it's not a separate thing because if there's no human being to talk and to think and to act, there's no action. It's not like it's still not a garment like putting on a jacket. It's an example for it, but compared to the keiches, it's already like a jacket, so to speak. It's already a form of expression. Let's see how much he explains. And we'll see. So they're like something outside. Therefore, they're not united with the soul. And that's why they conceal, when they cover up on the spirit, on the energy and the life of the energy of the spirit. Let's see what. I mean, this needs explanation, obviously. Let's see what he says, and if it needs more, we'll try to elaborate. What does he say? Vagam, the machshava the mitzvah gam kim in yonim legala seira nefesh, and even though these three levushim, these three garments, they're also what's their role? Isn't their role to reveal? Their role is not to conceal. We're not talking about protecting from weather, or the cold, or tzatznias, or any other reason a person would want to cover up when they're seeing other people. So why is he saying they're mastirin? They're not miyuchet, fine. They're not as attached as the keiches, but why? They're revealers. They're not concealers. See, now he's bringing asius. The asius, which is essentially the essence of machshava dibur ma'aseh. What makes machshava? Why is it a levush? Why? Let's just explain this a little. Your brain right here has millions of ideas, millions of memories. Varaya, someone asks you what happened yesterday. You'll come up. What happened 2 days ago? You'll say. You may not remember everything, but you have a lot of memories. Someone will say, how many memories do you have? It's impossible to list. Someone asks you to write down everything you remember. Is that even possible?
I remember better what happened 20 years ago than yesterday.
Yeah, but is it impossible to write everything you remember? It's almost impossible. So basically it's stored in the brain in some way. Just like data is stored in a hard drive. No one really knows exactly, but in the neurons, they store it. It's stored like energy. And you're not even conscious of it. Even though as soon as you say, what did I have for breakfast yesterday, or who did I meet, or where did I walk, it pops in. What changes when you're consciously retrieving it from the data folder, so to speak? Asius. That you're giving it asius. Here, for example, if I said, what happened yesterday? It's stored in your memory. You don't need asius, because you're not consciously thinking. When someone says, now the machshava starts coming to action. It's a force. It's essentially, what's happening is it's accessing let's call it the latent neurons that are in your brain there somewhere, and it's now giving it letters and saying, okay, yesterday I walked, even if you don't say it to someone, you say it to yourself. What are you saying? You're giving a definition. I walked down Eastern Parkway yesterday, or I went to a store. Then if someone asks you to speak it, you'll say it. You want to write it down, you write it down. What you're essentially doing is giving tangible definition to something that is stored in a way that doesn't need definition. Now, for example, even in psychology, sometimes you'll find people that have a certain pachad, a certain fear, even physical fear. They woke up in the middle of the night scared. And one of the goals in doing that is you're trying to go into those neurons, which can be unconscious, and give it asius. Many big fears and many deeper things, the problem is it gets so bedded that you can't even give it. It's the opposite. You can't express it. It would be good if you were able to put it into machshava dibur ma'aseh, because that would give it it would be defining it and say, you know what? 10 years ago, I was walking down the street and a dog attacked me, and that terrified me. Many people don't even know that happened, because what will happen is the event will have gone away, but the memory remains embedded, and it becomes so deep inside of you that you don't even have asius. You can't even remember. You can't even recall that that's necessarily the thing that terrifies you. I'm just trying to explain how there can be a detachment, because it's critical to understand. So there's the soul, there's the keiches, the faculties are at work. And then machshava dibur ma'aseh are expressors. The difference between machshava and dibur is only that it's expressing to yourself instead of to someone else. But machshava is conscious thought. Machshava is not unconscious. Machshava has to be that you're thinking about it. That's why when we say kavana, mitzvahs boy kavana, the mitzvahs that need a kavana. Someone can say, what do you mean? I have my kavana primis. Who says I have to think about it? You know, I'm not saying it anyway. Like in karbonis, you don't have to say your kavanah; it's in your machshava. So you say, why do I need to consciously think? It's somewhere there, especially up the Rambam, that every Jew wants to do mitzvahs. It's in the nefesh. It's yitzrei hushan. So primis hanefesh, my kavanah is always good. No, because the Torah wants you to bring it into conscious that your machshava right now is focused. If not, the whole inyanim of hesach hadas and all that falls apart, falls away. The whole idea of that, it means that you're concentrating on this right now, even if no one else knows, but you know. That you're present, basically. What makes you present? That you're taking these, whatever is latent, and turned it into a tangible reality, which means I'm thinking about this right now.
Even a thought.
Yeah. Well, like when you're in a conversation with someone and you're like wander away. Yeah, you're physically there, but your machshava is not there, and you're definitely not the rest of you.
Happens today all the time. People talk to each other.
Exactly. I'm trying to point out how machshava is different than seichel. Because I remember, the reason maybe I'm overdoing it here is because, maybe I'm not overdoing it. Remember, I was in yeshiva, it made me crazy when we learned chassidus the first time, and they taught us in Tanya, you took keiches, and I used to always think, what do you think seichel and machshava? And I remember I asked my uncle who was Amashpi, I asked, he said, this Elteven was the first day. With that answer you got, you get older, you'll understand. I'm not saying he didn't, but if for some reason they didn't have patience to explain this, because they take it so for granted, maybe. And then, because, I'll tell you what, because they're living in seichel, not dibur, they're not expressing what they know. But you have to force. That's why it's critical. It's one of the you say this. People machshava, seichel, machshava. What's going on? To me, it sounds like the same thing. Seichel means seichel, machshava means seichel, but it's not. It's completely two different worlds. See, dibur and seichel, you can understand it more. Machshava is essentially dibur to yourself. That's what it is. Obviously, it's a far higher level, and there's a big world between machshava and dibur.
So you're saying seichel is the latent neurons?
Yeah, for sure. Seichel is the brain power. Like someone has brain power, they never use it. The Alter Rebbe told that chassid. A lamdan is not someone who could learn a ganef. He said to him, why don't you use your keiches to learn? You're such a... She says, I could always use it. I'm a lamdan. It's a potential scholar. So the Alter Rebbe said, just like a ganef is not someone who could steal, but someone who steals, a lamdan is not someone who could learn, but someone who learns. In other words, brain power is very nice. Man, look, how many faculties do we have right now? This is talking about a model. This is a real model. If you're a real mentor, you had a real mentor to help you analyze the ratio between your potential and your actual. It would be probably quite sad to see for all of us, because our potential is always greater. The question is, how far is the two? And usually not very far, because we get caught up in life and whatever it is, and we're not realizing how much we have that we can give and we can actualize. That's the best way to explain it. Once you machshava, doesn't mean you're doing it yet, but machshava, at least you become aware. And then when you can express it, and then when you can actually act on it, then you're talking business.
Seichel will be all your millions of life experiences that are dormant and
or also, and even the potential things that you haven't learned. You learn something tomorrow that your mind is able to. The power, the amount. It's also brain power. It's not just memories.
When you're thinking 1 + 1 is 2, that's already machshava.
Yeah, it's a conscious, but it's a machshava of the seichel. What you're doing is you're taking your, let's say, the machshava, which is think of it like a shovel, and you're reaching into your neurons and you're bringing out this thing called 1 + 2 = 2, 1 + 1 = 2. In other words, because the levush is nothing. Machshava without a brain is going to do nothing. It's like a shovel without a treasure. You need to have the reservoir, the arsenal, so to speak. Your treasure chest. This is a way. The machshava is asius. They go in there and give it letters, give it words. I mean, a true education of somebody. Whenever I teach Tanya, I always say this because it blows people away. The true education of somebody is really teaching them how their keiches and levushim should become less apart. They have the great powers, and to learn how to express it, not just in thought, in speech and action. That's real education. That's what you're really training people when you ask them to write, even mathematics, even secular education. In Torah, for sure, that's it. But it's not taught that way. We learn Torah to know what God wants and know how to do mitzvahs. We learn other things to know how to make money. But everyone forgets the ikar. All these things you learn is your soul has the knowledge. Your soul has information. but you have no way, you don't know how to express it. You don't know how to do it. You don't have the experience. What you're doing is training somebody to do it in an efficient way. So any type of even speaking. When you teach someone how to speak well, or you teach them how to think well. I know people you could see right away, they're brilliant people, but they don't know how to think. What do we mean they don't know how to, they're brilliant, how could they not know how to, they don't think in an orderly way. They think B before A. Like even the idea when we say, klal kedem aprat, then aprat. There are people, you hear them speak, you can hear right away, they tell you the prat before the klal, then they suddenly hear the klal in the middle. They get it, but they're completely disorganized. So the atheists are what's disorganized. So the idea, some of them get. And then you see other people who may not have the same brain power, but they're very orderly. And you hear something, you see it's... So and you could see this all the time. I've given an example. Let's say you take shy children in school. So they're always misunderstood, in most cases, unless by someone who appreciates. A shy child doesn't ever speak, so you think maybe not so smart, doesn't get it. But we have Herzog who says, maybe he's just shy. Why is he shy? Whatever reason. Some people are shy because they've been silenced also. They've been embarrassed. They said something when they were younger, and they were laughed at. So they don't want to speak. Normal thing. You see this all the time, and it becomes like that. My wife has a story. She was by the Rebbe. She was a little girl. So the first few weeks she went to school. Then she refused to go to school. But Peshum Eifim wouldn't go. Like hysterical. I'm not talking about every kid doesn't want to go. Pung then they went, it was like El time, the first month. And they saw clearly there's something more going on. It wasn't but she wouldn't. So they were by the Rebbe Yechidus, my Shver had Yechidus. So the whole family was there. They finished the whole Yechidus. So the Rebbe, I think turned to my wife, her little girl, like what you're learning in school or something like that. So she starts crying. So her father, my Shver, tells the Rebbe, she doesn't want to go to school. And we don't know what to do. So the Rebbe said, Mistame hat chavetir angeschlagen. Probably a friend of hers hit her. Out of the blue, the Rebbe said. And when she heard that, my wife, she started crying. She said exactly what happened. Not only was it a friend, it was the daughter of the teacher. So she was terrified to tell anybody, which is common. I mean, it's a small form of, I can imagine real abuse, what kids don't tell. But right here, so would it come out? It probably would have come out. She would have got over it after a while. But here's a girl who doesn't have a way to communicate, because whatever reason, she's terrified because it's her teacher's daughter. So she just holds it in. What's going on? That's a perfect example. Should this get worse and worse and worse, you have yourself a dysfunctional human being, and I would have a dysfunctional wife. As it is, I turn out to be the dysfunctional one. Little humor. My point, I'm just giving you a small example. That's why when you speak to children, they don't have words yet. They don't have machshava dibra ma'aseh. Doesn't mean they don't have anything to say. That means they don't have feelings. Of course they do. They may not know how to express themselves yet. They may be scared. They may not know that they won't be judged, etc., etc. My point is, there's a big gap between who we are and how we express ourselves. And very often, many people express themselves the other way around. You find people are passive aggressive. They do things that there's no question they did not have a way to express themselves normally, so they find these distorted ways to express themselves.
She expressed herself.
Yeah, right there. She said that's exactly what happened. When once the Rebbe said it, she felt relieved, so she was able to say that's.
The Rebbe said it.
Yeah. The Rebbe said probably someone hit her.
It's not from expressing herself because she already spoke to her parents about it.
She didn't speak. She wouldn't go. She
knew somebody.
She knew, but no one else knew. She refused to go to school. I'm just giving an example.
I just shared that.
The Rebbe was wise. He understood. Once he said it, she said exactly what happened. So it all straightened out. That's it. Yeah. That's a happy ending. Not always it ends happily. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make here is that there's a big gap. Because look, you want to have a good example of the difference. We're talking about an interface between Atzmus and Welt. And we're talking a little smaller level, but it's also interface. It's interface who you are and what you express. You see people, tell me, are they expressing who they really are, or are they expressing the new persona they chose to express? They say everybody has a jar near their door. When they go outside, they have different masks. And you wear a mask for different occasions. Everybody's got masks.
Oh, that's okay.
Get stuck with your mask.
Depends who you meet. You have different masks. And then you become your mask. The tragedy is when you become your mask and you don't even know it's a mask.
No, there's a functional thing. It's like, for example, when you
hit
your kid, you pretend you're angry or whatever you do.
No. Look, like he said here, when you go to the cold, you should be wearing a coat. The point is, I'm talking whether you're wearing masks when you shouldn't be wearing one, or when you're should be. The point. Bottom line is that we have here a core soul, we have its faculties, and now we have its levushim. So now he's asking the question. So he said, so the faculties are revealers. The levushim, the outer garments that are what he calls nifrid, separate, like machshava dibur maisa, which you can address and undress. You could think about one thing and then think about nothing. You can't change your faculties. You can't change the color of your eyes. You can't change your brain power. You can work on it and develop it, like you said, the containers, but it's what it is. You could think one thing in a second, stupidity, and then you could be thinking about the deepest, loftiest idea. Same thing with dibur. So now he's asked a question. He's explaining. How could you say it's concealers? They're revealers. Machshava dibur ma'aser reveals. So now he's going to explain. Remember we said, my whole thing that I was explaining now is I want to explain how the levushim have letters. The letters are defined details. Asis, words, or letters, more precise. Fundamentally, their core personalities that they conceal. Like words in writing, like the written word. Someone that is not a bas seichel, someone that is not intelligent person. Like a little child. Will know nothing from these letters. Because they fundamentally conceal. Because letters themselves, as we'll learn, are express. But if you think about the letters themselves, purely the letters, they're not revealers. If you sing to a child, for example, even the child doesn't understand, the child will respond. Or some other, you hug the child. But letters, a child has not yet developed appreciation, so the letters themselves are not revealers, they're concealers. It's a Pesach Maimer. What does he say? Okay, no, that's what it says there. Okay, fine. The same thing, letters of speech, spoken word. They are fundamentally they conceal. Like you'll speak an intelligent idea in front of someone who doesn't have any intelligence. Even though now we're not talking about a child that can't even read yet. Even though the idea sadibur, he knows your words, he can hear your words and understand the words. He won't know and understand the idea at all. He'll just hear words. So it's even less in the written. Well, the same thing with written, frankly, with a person like this. If he reads the words, he'll be able to read, but he won't understand. Okay, just using different examples here. So the truth is, this example can also be a written word. But a child is even more, because a child can read and can hear. So either way, you speak to a child with words that he doesn't understand, he won't know what you're talking about. But I guess written is even more distant from a child, because they can't even read. Spoken, you can at least, maybe the child can sense, joy or anger or a mood. Okay. Hagam shein megalim. So therefore, even though they reveal these letters, they clearly reveal, because someone who does have intelligence can appreciate this. Yesh behem isalmus gamkin. They also have concealment. The faculties, on the other hand, fundamentally don't have anything that's a concealing element. Adrab. All they are, on the contrary, they are revealers. In parentheses. He's giving an example of a body. Yeah. The body does not conceal on the life force that's in it. You can tell that the body is alive. Even if there's no movement. Let's say a person's just sitting still without any movement. Need of a nigla, it's obvious and revealed by guf and the Baishu Chai that this is a live body. And that's because it's an attached garment. So what he said earlier, the guf is like a lavush, the guf is a reveals, like the keiches, they reveal. So he went even further, not just the keiches, the guf itself. Yeah, because that's a lavush miyuchad. Yeah, that's the comparison. The whole chapter is that's the comparison. Guf is a lavush miyuchad compared to lavushim chitzenim, the garments. Yeah, that's that he said in the previous chapter. Here he compared guf to keiches and lavushim machshav d'bermaisa to lavushim outside of the body. Yeah, it works. It just he's going back here, but this is interesting. In other words, yeah, it's a revealer. We're not talking now whether it conceals the core of the soul. Obviously, keiches can't tell you about the essence of the soul because they're not. That's not that. But whatever they are, they reveal. That's the point. He's not saying there's nothing. Obviously, if a person looks at faculties, you could say, 1 second, they're concealing the real soul that you are. But that's not what they're doing. The real soul is concealed even without them. Whatever they are doing is revealing. Oishis, on the other hand, conceal while they reveal.
Any gilu is concealing.
Yeah, but etzem, yeah. He said that earlier, I think. Yeah, any gili, but in this context, it's not. Yeah.
But how do they reconcile the whole thing?
But remember, any gili is concealing. But remember, without the gili, it would also be concealed. So it's not like. Now, oisius, by definition, have to conceal something to reveal it.
So what's the reason of the double?
Why it's not enough? Wait, this. I think he asked. You mean why not? We said before nefesh hamaskelis, and then we say medaber.
And the highest shematir.
So chelik vav yisrei. In chelik vav in Yisrei, the Rabbi says, look at the sichos, that medaber is not the power of dibur. It's the power of being able to go out of himself. So it's a different element in dibur. When I can speak to you, it means I can go out of myself. That's.
So it has to tell me the lesson from there myself.
Yeah. But that's not the dibur as an asis hadibur and the lavush of dibur. That's more dibur as in reaching out. It's two different things in dibur. He's not talking about that at all here. Remember, there's always going to be overlap. There's things that maisa are going to reveal deeper in the soul, with your soul than seichel even. Seif maisa machshav tchila. But it's not there now. Right now we're talking in the gradation, the regular process of things. Then, of course, everything's going to turn upside down. Then no seif b'tchilosan. Remember, there's always, this parsha is never over. You never get it. Just when you think it's all figured out, then he comes and says, and that, mitzad giluyim. Mitzad etzem, is the ganze Sache, hiptzacham fakeh. But it's not a contradiction. It's not a contradiction. To say that the B'Seif Ma'is Machshav Tchila, therefore your mice is higher than your brain, of course not. The brain is a most powerful force. Okay. So that's the guf. That's the reason for that is that the faculties, being an attached garment, they reveal the nefesh. Okay. Now starts a parenthesis. Let's see how long it goes. We have our parentheses measure. Okay, not bad. The long ones, the real long ones, are the ones to be that drive fear into the hearts of human beings, because they become a whole mimer of their own. That's the Hamuzgit. What would you say if it goes over 15 lines? We know we have to change channels.
There's several parentheses on the inside.
There's some people that learn it, they skip over it and then they
I know. Now, sometimes it's important to do that too.
flow, it's much easier.
But I find that the reason I don't do it is not just because I'm trying to be difficult, because I find sometimes right outside the parentheses he's referring to things in the parentheses too. That also happens. So sometimes you skip the parentheses and you can't really understand the flow. Sometimes you could, sometimes you can't.
The chapter, then you go back to the parentheses.
Yeah, I'm just saying, sometimes you simply can't even go further because he makes a reference. So anyway, it's fine. It all depends which parentheses. You could tell. There's some parentheses you could tell are just their own sugya. Okay, so here goes. Vihine. So what do we have? Just let's go before we go here. So we determined that we have two types of garments. Levush HaMiyuchad is the keiches. the faculties, they are not the soul, but they are revealers of the soul's powers. Okay, they're attached. They're like an attached levush, like the guf. So they reveal. That's not machshav d'irma. That's keches hanefesh. Then there's levush. Then there's the levushim hanifradim. That's thought, speech, and action that are not attached. They're detached, and they conceal. They're concealers. And even though they reveal, he established because Asius, the letters that they contain are essentially concealers, and we see that in people who don't have the seichel. So you see, Asius are not going to reveal for them anything. I mean, there are many examples for this. You know, when you see a strong person lift something up, everybody can tell that he's strong. Like we said before, Avnei the Muzgeshes, bro. But you see, let's say, a strong person lift a cup, you don't see it. In other words, there are things like keches reveal a person's power. Like I said before with Shem HaTayar. There are names that describe and reflect and express that power. And there are things that are not going to express it at all. Now, it doesn't mean they don't have expression in them, but they also have in it a whole state of like Oishis, they conceal. Let's see what he says now in the parentheses. I thought that he could at least give at least a little respite for a chapter or two. So, okay, good. You got it all figured out. So just in case, he's always reminding us that there's a keichaf law. Not always okay. So he says like this: "V'hinei now keiches are also concealed the spirit. V'haraya shari bizgalus keiches." Proof of that is because when the keiches are revealed, ein nefesh meir begili. The nefesh itself does not shine in a revealed way. What does this mean? As its own, when the keiches are concealed, then the core is revealed. Is he going to give an example? No. Okay. One of the examples for this, just to make sure we understand what we're talking about here, is he said earlier, remember by a simcha? He said when there's a very big simcha by the melech, by the father, so the simcha touches Etzem HaNefesh, so it's keiches either are completely concealed or completely revealed without a seder. In other words, you could see him dancing with everybody. He won't do the regular form of expression, of orderly expression, let's talk, and then this and this and this, is not there. There's a simcha peiris together, basically. When a person's keiches are strong, well, the same thing like nichnas yain yotza seid. When your keiches are very powerful, it usually is a sign that the nefesh is being concealed. That etzem HaNefesh. That's what he's saying here. Obviously, he's not going to contradict his whole thesis here.
It's dominant. It's more dominant.
Yeah. Another example is with the tefillah l'ani from the Baal Shem Tov's vort. I think it's a very good way to express this. So what's the vort tefillah l'ani? So he says like this: tefillah l'ani kiyatif what's the lashon there? Lefnei Hashem yishpech sichi. Right. Lefnei Hashem yishpech sichi. So the Baal Shem Tov asks why ani? What's lefnei Hashem yishpech sichi? So he says why a pauper? Two people were invited to see a king. One was an intellectual with all his keiches gluyim, all his faculties were revealed. Intellectual. And he appreciated all the king's glory and all the king's collections. And the other was a pauper, no keiches gluyim. He has no faculties that worked. A simple person. The first one came, so because he appreciated all the king's treasures, he appreciated the literature, his keiches were alive. Came in, he never saw such beauty before, so he gets so busy with it and distracted that he misses the appointment. The pauper comes in because he's illiterate and doesn't have any keiches he doesn't appreciate any of it. He goes right to the king, Lefnei Hashem yishpech sichi, and he asks for everything. That's where the keiches are mastirim. So you see that the keiches, when they're alive, the etzem HaNefesh, like we see at the time of the Baal Shem Tov, you sometimes stop appreciating the purity of the core of something because you're so caught up in its in the fireworks, which is why silence is sometimes more important than sound. Because a lot of keiches, a lot of noise. Not to say they aren't powerful, but you can miss the ikir, the core. I'm just giving some examples since he didn't just. Okay, keiches in the beginning. It's etzem. Him came moving is these galus keiches they helen etzem HaNefesh. So we understand from this that the revelation of these faculties is through concealing the etzem HaNefesh, because if the etzem HaNefesh was revealed, the keiches wouldn't have any place to be expressed. However, obviously this doesn't contradict what we said. This helam of the faculties on the soul, this means that the real pnimis, the inner core energy of the spirit, is not revealed in the faculties. Only the external spirit of the neshama nefesh is revealed in them. But what's revealed is revealed. In other words, they're not concealing be'etzem. What's happening is they're not revealing the real you. Okay, fine. But what they reveal, they reveal. On contrast, the garments of thought, speech, and action, they're actually concealing. So when a person, for example, is using his mind, he's not concealing his soul. He's concealing. Yes, the etzem nefesh is concealed because it doesn't express itself in your mind. But what it's revealing is the power of the mind. Here, the levushim have an additional element, the actual concealing factor. The keiches don't have a concealing factor; they just are not revealing the etzem because they're keiches. They have a thing that they actually conceal, because when you put it in words, in letters, the letters conceal. For bas seichel, for someone that can't even see the idea. By keiches, everybody can see, as I said, when someone's using their faculties, everyone can see it. Even a child, you don't need to have seichel for that. Asius already are concealer, someone without seichel, like he said, is not going to understand it. Interesting word. Never seen that. Saw that before. We'll organize. No. He's trying to say now. Okay, he made the distinction. Now he's saying that that you do use sometimes keiches nefesh as a mashal for kelim. This is all connected to the whole content. You see, right now, till now, we've been discussing keiches and levushim was all coming to explain kelim. So the question is, which one is a real mashal for the kelim of Atzilus? The truth is, which is one? The levush hamiyuchad, the body, the faculties. So that's what he's just bringing it back to the nimshal. Because all this is an example. That's why this parenthesis, he says, V'hinei naidech hamoshel d'keiches nefesh al b'chinas hakelim. He's saying naidech, meaning we are presenting. Naidech is like a shulchan aruch, like you are laying out. Mishtaltes, right? That's what naidech means. Yeah, naidech hamoshel d'keiches nefesh al b'chinas hakelim. De'in hahelem shalem hu zeh she'ein hapnimis mizgala b'hem. In other words, what he just said now about keiches, that it does not reveal the pnimis and etzem of the soul, the core of the soul, but what it does reveal, it reveals. That is in the nimshal the kelim. What are kelim? The kelim, their helam, is that they don't reveal the inner, the pnimis of Eir is not revealed in them, or the pnimis of the etzem.
What is revealed by them is revealed by them.
Right. Mavur b'mokmach is v'nei naidech hamoshel d'keiches kelim. Naidech, yeah. Mavur b'mokmach. This is the level of kelim within keser. Okay, so it goes like okay. Basically, what he's doing now is like this. We explained keiches and levushim in the way he explained. The keiches reveal because they're attached, and the from now. Now he qualified and said there's an element that keiches also concealed. However, in context of our discussion here, it's still what it reveals. It reveals. They conceal the energy that's manifest in them. V'hinei. Now he's saying like this. Now, when you break it down, we can apply. Neidich maybe even apply this example of keiches hanefesh. But we can apply this element of keiches hanefesh that conceal on the pnimius. So mavur b'makmach zeh b'chinas kelim shebekeser. The containers of keser are like that they reveal that they. I'm sorry.
Measuring.
Yeah, meidich means to be measured. When you say meidich, means upschatzen. That's what he means here. Neidich. He's trying to say how to apply or present this mashal. We can. He's saying like this. He said, Kelim shebekeser, in other words, don't reveal the inner, but what they reveal, Avol kelim d'atzilas, but the containers of atzilas, hu shamalim mala'ir hamislabish b'techem. They do conceal the energy that manifests in them. K'mosh yizbar l'kaman perek kuf chaf aleph, as we will explain later, chapter 121. V'zeu she'er nasik k'mehus hakeli. And that is how the energy becomes like the personality of the container. Okay, so right now, this really is like more consistent with this parentheses than what he's saying outside of the parentheses. What he's basically saying is,
Still part of the parentheses.
yeah. He's basically saying that in Kalim itself there's two levels. The Kalim of Keser, they are what he said here. They hide the previous, but everything else is they reveal. The Kalim of Atzilus are more like the Levushim that he's speaking about here, which really contradicts our discussion here. Because now we're saying Kalim of Atzilus are like more like Oisius. So now he's qualifying. Ach tzarech lemer. B'chlolus hu ha'hefer b'mchinas primus ha'kelim v'chitzena. Yet we can say in general, this is the difference between the inner containers and the outer containers, meaning in Atzilus itself. So therefore it works. Based on what it says, Mokem Macher, then it doesn't work. Because Mokem Macher, then Kalim of Atzilus are more like Levushim here. But if you say it's inner containers and outer containers that we discussed earlier, if we recall.
So in other words, he's not accepting that it's a kelim, the difference between a kelim of
What's that?
kelim of Atzilus. It's more between.
No, that's a different explanation. It says b'chlolos or b'pratyus. No, I would not say not accepting. There's two different levels of explanation. In one place it says this. He says b'chlolos. This is the difference between the inner dimension of the containers, the outer dimension. The primis hakeli and atzilus. Hushakelu kamoya eir v'inyanuhu l'tayir l'galas ha'seir. That the inner container is like a container, and its role is, and it's similar to the eir. Like he said in the mashal before, guf. The guf is megala the chayis. Even if you're not moving, the body reveals. That's like the primis hakeli. So it is l'galas ha'eir. Yeah. It's l'tayir, to describe and to reveal the air. Remember I said about a table, a stable table, or something like that. So it's revealing the personality of. Okay, Commissioners bar the comment that as we'll learn later. One second. V'chetzein sakeli, in the outer dimension of the container, hu shamayli malo air, uliful kefimu hu sakeli. And that the same is they're like they're concealed energy, and it should cause that the light should work commensurate to the container. V'ayim masher kosav le'il or l'kaman. V'ayim masher kosav l'kaman dechetzein sakelim ebchinis levushim. The outer containers are like the levushim, the garments. Okay, so that works. And the previous sakelim will be like the keches. V'ayim masher zbar le'il perik tzadi gimel. Yeah. Right. And elsewhere it explains the example of the faculties on Eretz Datzilis, which means the faculties are the Eretz, not even the Kalim. So that's a third interpretation. This parenthesis has a bunch of interpretations. Eretz Datzilis. So the Keiches and Nefesh are Eretz Datzilis, then the Kalim are Levushim, for sure. Even the Primus Kelim them are Levushim. Okay. There's three interpretations here.
The worst of it, the Nazar.
There are three interpretations here. Let's spell them out. Halt cup. Okay. What he spoke about inside here, he's trying to explain to us Kalim of Atzilis, that they are transparent. So he's explaining the difference between Kalim and Levushim. We haven't even gotten to which is which exactly. But Kalim and Levushim, that there's in Levushim itself two levels. One's conceal and are detached. Ones that are attached and reveal. The Keiches are like the higher level. They're attached and they reveal. Whereas the external Machshava Dibra Maisa, not like the faculties, not the Keiches and Nefesh, they are detached and they conceal. In the parentheses he adds, but also the Keiches conceal? They conceal the Pnimius HaNeshama. So the initial answer is that what it means is they conceal. Yes, there's a part of the Sav Nefesh that they conceal. But what they reveal, they reveal. Whereas the Asis of Machshava Dibra Maisa, the letters of the garments, they are concealed even on the energy that's within them. The faculties don't conceal on what's inside of them. They just don't have inside of them the Pnimius. But what the Koiches get from this Nefesh, they reveal. Koich HaSeichel, Koich HaMidus, and so on. When it comes to Lavush, when you put it into Lavush, even what is there, it conceals. Not just, it's not to say, for example, when someone puts on a garment, yes, of course the garment doesn't tell you what the person is really like. That's for sure. But even what's in the garment doesn't reveal the whole of what's inside there. Like, let's say you take idea and you put it into words that you speak. The words themselves are revealing part of it, but they're not revealing all the idea that's within them. And the proof, as he brought, is a Bar Seichel, who hears those words or reads them, can't understand it. Koiches, they don't reveal the whole part of who you are, the essence of you, but what they reveal, whatever comes inside of them, they reveal. They're not concealing. They reveal the power, let's say the brain power, whatever it may be. Okay. Now he explains what is it in the Nimshal. So he says like this. There's two different explanations. He says it reveals and conceals, but also conceals. It conceals, even the seichel within it conceals. The best proof is someone hears the words and doesn't understand. He won't know. He doesn't know. He won't understand it.
Well, what if someone does understand? They say Bar Seichel, so
he won't understand it all. It's still an element of concealment, but that's not what he's saying here. The fact is, as soon as you say it's an asis, you know it's already doing some concealing. Look, Dibur compared to Machshava conceals. For sure, right? You can't say everything you're thinking.
Right.
So there you go, that's enough.
Okay.
Yeah. Machshava, the same thing as Machshava L'Gabe.
Can we say that what it's revealing, it is revealing the same thing? Like
No, Varaya, he doesn't bring it, but Varaya, that over the years, you can take the same thing you read and understand a much deeper part that you didn't understand without the teacher, because it's there. But meanwhile, it was concealed because you only appreciated those. Yeah. Remember, faculties, koiches, like you said, we grow. As a person grows, their brain power grows. That brain power is dependent on the containers. That's why it's not the etzem. But at the same time, it grows. It's grown and that's it. It's not a concealer. You have more brain power, period. The thing is, when you're talking about expressing it, when you express it, now you really need expression. Expression is right away you're dealing with garments that are measuring how much is coming out. Your whole brain power never comes out in a machshav. There's no way it could. But the brain, carrying all those ideas in them, has it all. There's nothing being concealed. I mean, it's concealed from you and me because we're not bringing it into machshava dibur ma'aseh. That's not what he means by concealed. Okay. Understand what I just said? Because someone could argue, what do you mean? We don't know all the power we have in our brain either. It's concealed completely. But we're not talking about concealed by us. We're talking about, on its level, it's not doing any concealing. It's all there. Whereas the machshava dibur ma'aseh, the whole point of it is communicating it. And communication immediately means it has to be measured and defined and so on. And that right away is a concealing factor. So if you talk about revealing to outside people, obviously without the levushim you have nothing revealed. No one knows what you're thinking without speaking. But it's revealing through concealing. The point is, when you go from the top down, where is there more energy revealed? It's in the faculties. Less energy revealed and more concealed in the garments. That's the bottom line. Now he qualifies. Okay. So we just established that that's what it is. But then he says in the Nimshal, goes like this. Like I said, there's three ways he explains it. One is what we just said, was that the koiches and levushim is essentially the kelim of Atzilus, are like the faculties, that reveal, even though the primis they don't reveal, and the levushim are what conceals. That's outside of that's lower than the kelim of Atzilus. So the kelim of Atzilus are like the levush hamiyuchet, basically. like the tikkunim, what he said, the Pasach Eliyahu, tikkunim, levushim, because they're attached and they reveal. But then he says, that it says elsewhere, that the kelim that reveal are kelim of keser. But so there, according to that interpretation, then the kelim of keser are like the keiches, and the kelim of atzilus are like levushim, because the kelim of atzilus bring it down a level lower, and they reveal that they also conceal. But he said, that's one taich. That's not like here. What's the meaning here then? Different taich. Primis hakelim, chetzein hakelim. That the primis kelim of atzilus are like the faculties, and the outer containers of atzilus, outer dimension, they're like the garments. One second. And then he says, elsewhere, the last line he says in the parentheses, and that's what he says, the chetzein hakelim bechinas levushim. So then the outer part of the containers, they're like garments, outer garments detached and conceal, and the inner part and the inner containers are like the faculties. That's it. That the eris are the faculties. So you have mamish three interpretations. The eris are the faculties, and the containers are the levushim, meaning even the primis are containers of the levushim. So you have three interpretations. So the eir is like the faculties. So what we have is like this: the faculties are either the kelim of keser, or primis kelim, or the eris of atzilus. So it's like literally three interpretations here.
Really been a second.
But it's not.
No,
It should have been.
Going integrations, then it's like,
Yeah, because he's bringing a new, because he's bringing a third at the end. Yeah. So basically, it goes like this. So the kelim of atzilus of keser, that's the keiches, and then atzilus is all levushim. Okay. One second. Why can't you then say so? That's even higher than the third one, because the kelim of keser are the keiches.
When he says kelim, he's iris and kelim together in the first one. Kelim atzilus are mailam in the air. Okay, they're mailam in the air. So that's levushim, that's keiches, and that's levushim. What about if that's kelim, that's keiches, and that's levushim? When he says kelim atzilus, he means with the air, right?
No.
No, the first one.
No. He means kelim. He means kelim of atzilus.
Kelim, so where's that air in the picture? I'm not talking. I know he's not.
No, they're not discussing it there. It's just the air is the air nefesh.
Doesn't mean it has like one unit.
No. 1 second. Then comes that the primis akeli, that's keiches and that's levushim. The air is keiches. Okay, you see, the keiches are either the kelim of keser, they're the eris of atzilus, or they're the kelim, the primis kelim of atzilus. Yeah. Then outside the parentheses, l'cheina it is the machshava dibur yochem lahachlif. What time is it?
1:35.
Should we stop here?
No.
There is alternate today, by the way. There is alternate.
Okay. And therefore, aces the machshava dibur yochem lahachlif. This is outside the parentheses again. And therefore, the aces of machshava dibur of thought and speech, you can change. The seichel hamalubish be'aces eli yochelis labisha be'aces acherim. You can take the idea, the mind, the intellect that was manifest in these letters, and you can address them, clothe them into different letters. He's explaining now the difference why this is levusham yuchid, this is levusham, this is attached or detached. So there you could change letters because it's detached. So it's like changing garments. Whatever, by faculties, by intelligence and emotions, when the intelligence radiates and illuminates in the emotions, and from there transmits these particular emotions. You can't say such a thing. That you can just take the seichel and it should manifest in other emotions. It doesn't work that way. If your mind worked a certain way and you came to a conclusion that you are attracted to something, and then your emotions are awakened to it, you can't suddenly say, right, Once a seichel wakens up love, attraction, that same idea is not going to be waking up suddenly different. It doesn't just change channels. Fear or awe or respect. It's two different emotions, two different seichels.
But let's
V'nimtza.
go back to your wife. Your wife she had the seichel to know she wasn't doing the right thing, and yet the seichel went down to a midas, and the midas overpowered.
What does this have to do with what we're discussing?
That's exactly what we're doing.
Not at all. What are you talking about? He's talking here that the same. You can take.
That was the right reaction. It was the right midah for the seichel. If he's using that much.
What?
She was scared. She had a seichel. Something happened.
So I wouldn't use an example of a child. Let's talk an adult who comes up with an idea, and the idea wakens up attraction to something. That idea is not going to wake up a repulsion to it, or it's a different midah. Whereas, let's say when you say an idea, you explain it you explain an idea. You can then go ahead and use the same words and explain a different idea. Words and letters are detached. Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Daled, you can use for many things. So we see from this that intellect and emotions unite with one another. And the emotions are compared to the intelligence are not like a garment and a detached thing. It's very simple. When you use words, you can use words, and the same words can be used by somebody else for some completely different intention. Because words, letters, are completely detached. Letters, you have A, B, C, D, and I tell you, use A, B, C as you wish. I can express one thing, you express something else. They're all they are outside garments. You can use them for many purposes. But when seichel and midas, they're far more tailored to each other. An idea awakens a feeling. Now they're connected to each other. You can't suddenly say, you know what, we'll take the idea, it's going to go to a different feeling. It's loyal, it's connected to this feeling.
Once you have a seichel, it's going to make an automatic midah in that way.
Not automatic, it's a seichel, the seichel that has, like you said, because seichel me'eredes ava.
How about the koyches of seichel? They're automatic also? You automatically think in a specific way?
Not necessarily.
They're koyches miyuchad. How does that work with the nefesh?
Koyches miyuchad, as he said before, is because they don't have anything outside of the nefesh. It's not like a tool, like a hammer. Koyches nefesh are coming from the nefesh. That's what he said before.
Automatically.
I don't know if the word automatic is the right word. I think it's just when the koyches expresses itself, it's only because there's a nefesh there. Where a levush, like a garment, let's put it this way. Someone dies, God forbid, their koyches are gone. Their levushim are not. They're still hanging in the closet. Let's put it that way. Or anything they said or they wrote is there, because it's outside of them. Koyches are soul faculties. They're not body faculties.
But the levushim are hanging. No, the levushim machshav is gone. But it's still there. Maybe it's.
Okay, but so same idea, but the idea is that it's something that's outside. That's because technically a machshava is only to yourself. You're not there, so you can't say.
But includes machshav in it.
Right, but it's aces, meaning that there's you've used things that are outside of the nefesh to express.
Because you expressed it.
Yeah.
Shaking your faculties cease to exist.
Yeah, because they're one with the soul. They're basically the soul's energies. They're soul faculties. They're not bodily faculties. The body is the containers that bring them out, that draw them out. Remember, the levushim are expressions. They're expressive. I just gave an example. I didn't mean it's exactly like that, but you see the idea. We're talking about different worlds here. Okay, so here we go. Here, this answers your question, by the way. The same thing is the general mind and heart and emotions compared to the core soul is that you can't conceive of ideas different than what is the way your personality of your soul is defined. Not think, your mind will work, not think. Think is different, right. Not machshava. Yeah. People have a kavod, like Hillel, chesed. The Shammai is gvura. It doesn't mean you can't be misgaben, you can try, but naturally speaking, your personality is from your nefesh. We're not talking now acquired personality from education. We're talking about the personality that comes from your nefesh. It's your personality. Personality of your mind and the personality... No, not necessarily. I don't know if that's nefesh. Not necessarily. Depends. You have to determine if it's nature or nurture. Here he's talking nature, not nurture. He's talking about definitely something that is the personality. You could see it in families. They think a certain way. Or this. If you can establish, for example, you could see people who were separated at birth from the same family. You see that they have certain personality features. Their minds work the same way, even though they didn't grow up in the same environment. Huh? Yeah. So you can tell. Now, some things are acquired. Some things you pick up from culture, from your environment, not necessarily. Here he's talking here. Yeah, machshava and dibur. That's why I said before. Machshava and dibur. You can train somebody to speak well, even though no one's born as a good speaker. Speaking is words. You train someone. It's like learning. Teaching someone how to organize. It's like how to. It's a technique. The brain power is not a technique. The brain power is pure power that's the energy of your brain. This one has this type of energy. This one. It's like some people are even exercising. Some people will be physically stronger than someone else. They just have that energy. So that's far more attached, because it's a personality. It's like a description. It's like I said, it's the soul expressing itself that way. Levushim change all the time. So you can change your words, you can change your letters, you can change how you explain something. People who have beteva, isha chesed is not an isha gvura. Again, I'm not talking about aveda. It's isha chesed. That's how he is. It's giving you an example. Like the neshama elikis, the soul, the divine soul. Its whole personality is elikus. Its seichel, its intelligence, its emotions, is all in godliness. And it's not shaykh, it's not capable of a different type of conceiving. It thinks only godly. What does God want? How does God? Like is known with the divine soul and the animal soul. The nefesh elikis kol haskol is vasogashallah, in the divine soul, all its comprehensions and all its conceptions and comprehensions, hakol belikus, everything is divine. Ve'ena nefesh musugelas klal in yonim achedim, and the soul is completely not capable, musugel, not possible, not shaped, has no capacity for something otherwise, or opposite. Or other things rather. And the animal soul is the opposite. Its conception, its comprehension is only in natural things, in nature things, in basically material things, in its nature, its inclinations. Right. Only once you put the nefesh elikis inside the nefesh abamis, these are two different personalities. Remember, nefesh elikis and nefesh abamis are not acquired. It's not through chinuch. You are implanted. Shtei nefoshes. Everyone has nefoshes asher asisi. That's the lashon there. Neshamas asher asisi. Everyone has two forces inside. One is driven by self-interest. The other one is driven for divine. Only when you put the nefesh elikis and nefesh abamis, then its comprehensions and elikus can be through inyanim tivim. You can look at nature and see things in the material world and understand godliness through it. It's also v'chein poyel is by nefesh abamis, and it also impacts the animal soul. That even though its natural way is to think about material, its own interests, its natural interest, shagam hu teven inyan eliki, he teven inyan eliki, that she too should understand the divine thing. So it's
interesting. It can impact the nefesh abamis, but could the nefesh abamis impact it?
Of course it could. He doesn't want to say that right now, but of course it could.
It could impact it by the fact that it could think about God through nature.
Or maybe the opposite. Maybe it can conceal it. Maybe it can't impact it. It can conceal it. It can definitely. Not, I mean, we don't need any proof for that.
The only proof could be that it's just the nefesh abamis is more active within us.
No, you could. It says in places. I remember in Tanya, because it's like taking the melech reshi shel melech. So you could take your nefesh elikis and use your divine powers, Rachmana litzlan, in something that's a mamash hepech. You see very high neshamas.
It's being dragged along, but on its own, maybe it can't be soiled.
I mean, it doesn't say here that I'm not going to guess, but it can be soiled in its deepest levels, but it can definitely be contaminated, for sure. There's no question.
Remember, levushim, and Tanya explains, levushim are neutral. Machshava dibur ma'aser are yours to determine. What do you say about a beini and a tzaddik? A beini, his keiches don't change, except his levushim are completely in his control. In other words, the keiches of the nefesh habamis never control the machshava dibur ma'aser. Now I'm talking about a hirhuri aveda. Machshava retzenis. As soon as so his machshava dibur ma'aser, in other words, which are the three ways we express. Remember I said to you, think of it, we have two hard drives. The animal hard drive, the divine hard drive. They have plenty of power. This one wants self. This one wants God. Okay? Now, the irktana zehaguf. Yeah, the irktana zehaguf. The body, in this case, not the body, the body means the levushim. Who's going to control what you're going to think, speak, and do? That's what it comes down to. That's all we do. We either speak, think, or do. Think, speak, or do. So there's a war. This one wants to occupy machshava, to consciously think about something animalistic. This one says, think about something divine.
What about deeper, like love and chesed?
I'm talking very simple. What do you mean?
That's machshava dibur ma'aser.
I'm talking what I want to talk. You're telling me I should talk about something else?
No, I can't.
After I finish, say you want to add. Fine. Okay, good. The dibur, same thing. What are you going to speak? Lashon hara, the chilas, or are you going to speak teira? Okay. What are you going to do? That's stuck in chesed or hurt somebody? Or selfish interest? So there's a war going on. Okay. The garments can change. You can 1 minute learn Torah, think Torah, and the next thing think something negative. The keiches, however, remain always. The keiches alakis are always divine. The animal, it depends what's being expressed. So you see the levushim are the changing things. The keiches always remain. There's still two furnaces that are shooting that have their power. And they remain where they are. They never change. Now, in the levushim, what could happen is that the nefesh alakis learns Torah. Now that it's in the nefesh habamis, it's using nefesh habamis garments, or not nefesh habamis tools, I would say, like the world, to understand alakus more. Can it happen the opposite? I'm sure. That's where the nefesh habamis is using so-called its divine keiches. Let's say a person was blessed with a lot of kindness. Chesed yishmal. Too much love. And then it becomes damaging. Of course it can go the other way. But he's speaking here, doesn't have to necessarily spell out the negative, he's speaking in a positive way.
No, I just want to understand the mechanics of it, like you have the chesed, not the levushim now.
Okay, I understand.
So chesed,
so chesed nefesh l'kis, chesed nefesh habamis.
At the same time, they're both shooting out, they get positive and
They're
negative.
both fighting.
Yeah. So you have love you have love for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you can have love for something in Zagashmi.
Not exactly the same time. Not the same time. Not consciously. No. You can have consciously. You can't have love. That's what the Cheves Levava says. Either you're loving God or you're loving the world. You can't love the same two at the same time.
They're both active.
No, they're both latent. Active is only the one that you're right now acting on.
Active is the one if you ask.
The levush. What levush is the levush following the chesed of the nefesh l'kis or chesed nefesh habamis? That's the difference. You have right now two choices: to go love something that is selfish, or go ahead and give someone tzedakah. So both are chesed. Who's going to control is going to be what the levush is going to do.
How about the midah? Not expressing.
So again, the midah of nefesh l'kis always is midas, godly midas. It always wants to do godly things. It's godly emotions. And midas nefesh habamis is always animal emotions.
What's deciding which midah you're going to feel? That's inside.
There's a third voice. Nefesh hasichlis. You could say in Tanya he says that whatever. That's another question. That's not relevant to us. You're given b'chira. You're given the ability. You're the referee. Who's you? Maybe it's your seichel.
How are you going to do it? But inside your feeling that you're having at the moment,
an attraction to something.
What's controlling that?
What you should be attracted to? We live in a world where we're always going to be attracted to gashmis, and we can also be attracted to ruchnis. Those are two are given. You're asking what you're going to act on, what's going to consume your life, what's going to drive your life. A Beinoni always controls himself and never lets the voice of the Nefesh Habamis affect his personality, his machshava dibur ma'aser. How does one? That's the Jacobson that we're given in our nefesh. Sometimes it's called nefesh hasichlis. That's the deciding, whatever the choice, wherever choice is. But that's another question. That's not.
I just asked it.
It obviously it can't be the nefesh alakis that decides. It can't be the nefesh habis that decides. It's you. So, places in Chassidus, not in Tanya, he talks about the nefesh hasichlis, a neutral referee that hears them both, and then with b'chira makes a decision. and then God takes the side.
Conscious also? Nefesh Sichos decides consciously?
It's very conscious. Why? Why don't you look next time you have two choices and ask yourself who's going to make the decision now? I don't know if you need an entity that makes the decision. It's the bottom line is who's going to control the two. It's a technical question. The bottom line, we have this all the time. Every time you make a choice between good and bad, so decision is being made, no?
Yeah.
Because you could have gone the other way.
What about the shell and all of that?
That's part of the Aveda. That's the whole point of Machshav Lev is the way that a Beinani controls that it shouldn't be expressed as Machshav Dibra Maisa. But it doesn't change his keiches. A Beinani's keiches, the Nefesh Habamis, are as strong as anybody's. It's just with time, he has more control. But his keiches, the Nefesh Habamis, bottom line here is what he's saying here is that the Nefesh remains always attached, and its faculties always remain attached to the Nefesh. That's all he's saying here.
That's as strong as everybody. I know it says that in Tanya,
But why are we going off track here? It's completely not relevant here. All he wanted to say here is that the Nefesh has a personality, and its faculties are always divine. When it's manifest in the Nefesh Habamis, its faculties also use the Nefesh Habamis' way of seeing things for Elikus. That's all he's saying here. He's not going to the whole discussion of Beinani. I'm just using it out of context, in context to understand the flow here. And it also piles on the Nefesh Habamis, it should understand in Eliki. He's qualifying, because if he doesn't say that, you can ask the question, 1 second, the Nefesh Habamis always remains separate, so what's going on? Because the Nefesh Elokis has the power to educate the Nefesh Habamis. But it's still a Nefesh Habamis. But because their core personality, they're distinguished and separate from one another, the divine and animal souls. Legamri, they're completely separate in all their faculties. Remember again, there's Eser Keches of Nefesh Habamis, Eser Keches Nefesh Elokis. They are forever separate. They're not the same. And they do not change, like he said with the letters. You can use the same words and letters and just change and express an idea, express a different idea. Mides are connected to Seichel, that was the first thing. And all the Keches are all attached. It's all a Levush HaMiyuchad connected to the soul. And the thing is most obvious by Baal Tshuva. Then the beginning, his comprehensions, his thought process, his ideas, and his emotions were all in the opposite of the divine, God forbid. And through Tshuva, they would change from one extreme to the other. All the conceptions and conceivings and hanochas and the uplegging and hanochas and his axioms and assumptions or convictions, that's a good word. All his askalos and his convictions and his nefesh v'chein kol amidus and all his emotions hakol hu l'tev is all now toward good. Why is that? Because in the beginning, the faculties of the animal soul were revealed, and they dominated his life. And through tshuva, now were revealed the powers, the faculties of the divine soul. What does this mean? It's not that his nefesh habamis suddenly turned into a nefesh elokis. It's a question who was dominating, because these two are two different souls. So about tshuva, you see it very obvious because you see a real shift from one to the other. What changed? Not souls didn't change. What changed was which soul dominated. Before it was the animal, now it was the divine. Because these two, like he just says here, because the faculties are according to the personality of the soul, and it cannot be in any other way. The same thing is going now even higher, according to the personality of the core, of the source, of the root of the soul in Chesed and Gvura, or that's also how is Seichel and Agosa. Like Beishamai Beisil. The root of Beishamai's soul, or Shammai, and Beishamai is a school. It's interesting, Beishamai, not just Shammai. Is what? Is Gvura. Therefore, his mind works that way. And Beis Hillel, they're rooted in Hillel, which is the mind and the emotion of Gvura, of Chesed, so their mind and And comprehension is in a lenient way.
It said I wanted Beis Shammai because the people that were attracted to that way of thought went to his.
Yeah. ובדרך כלל מה שזה תפס העניין שכלי באופן כך וזה באופן אחר מצד הנפש. And in general, why one person grasps a concept a certain way and someone in a different way, that's because of the soul. But in general, because you could train somebody, obviously. But in general, the way we grasp things is very reflective of how our souls are rooted. והגם, in our parentheses, והגם שיש חילוקים גם כן באסיס המלבישים. Okay, before we go here, so let's distinguish it. In the beginning, this is not like levushim, this is not like detached garments, machshava dibra ma'isa, which constantly move either way, like we just said. Machshava dibra ma'isa of your life is neutral. They're neutral garments. They don't have any personality. What you're going to think about, what you're going to say, what you're going to do today, has right now are empty shells. It depends what you fill it with. Keiches, Nefesh Elokis, fill it with divine things. Keiches Nefesh Habanim, fill it with empty. Think of it like empty, neutral containers, but levushim, garments. Yeah.
Go to the supermarket, shopping cart, you put anything you want in there.
Right, exactly. So levushim, and also levushim, as he said in the beginning of this, he said, what did he say? At the end of the parentheses, you can change. Change it for different letters, you can change it for different keiches of the different faculties of animal and divine soul. Now he adds, again, another qualification. You see, this is all goes back to the parentheses, is in the interface what kelim they are. It means, in other words, how much of the kelim are existence and how much of the kelim are divine. Based on the discussion here, the faculties are a good example for expressing the source. So they're very transparent, basically. But according to the three different ways he explained, it's not necessarily, it depends whether, it's like the shittas almost, whether the kelim are lakus, whether the tzir is in the eris or the kelim. I'm just thinking it through. Now we're going back to Shammai and Hillel. You just said that their intelligence is defined by their soul, and they can't change that. So even though there are differences in how, in the Asius, Hamalbishim es HaSeichel, this Seichel that this individual says that's informed by his personality of his soul, there are differences in how you express it. We learned this also earlier. Yeah, this one expresses the same idea in these words, these letters. This one expresses the same idea in different letters. And that also comes from the nefesh, the way why they chose these words. We spoke about that earlier. Where was that discussed? By the Rash, he gave examples. The Rashba, I remember where it was. Okay, I'll look it up soon. Like it says elsewhere. So he's saying this is a separate discussion. The letters come from the etzim, the core personality of the spirit, that's higher than the revelations, the nefesh of the spirit. The makol mokim ba'gilum yachalem esasechel gam be'esis acherim. In other words, the fact that there are some people who will use always a certain way of expressing, will express it one way and others, even though that comes from the core root, the truth is, in Giluyim, you could say it in different words. Basically, he's saying that when people express themselves, intelligent people, there's two sides to it. One side comes from the core, and they definitely have a certain style that's different than another person's style. But nevertheless, in the Giluyim, even the person that has a different style can use different expressions, obviously. So there's an element that you could find his style, and some things you may not be able to fully distinguish.
You basically could override it.
You can override it, or you could say it's the general style is his. But in actual expression, he's now using, I know this from writing. I can write several styles, but someone who really knows can probably find one style in them all. Okay, there we go. So let's just finish this paragraph, this thing. And it could be that with other words, that seichel will not be revealed as much, because he's tampering with his core style. Be'em vet nit arob getragen der seichel azefil in the aces k'moshe be'im hayoim areis and be'aces shalei. Aha, yeah, exactly. He's saying that everyone has their style and their aces, his aces. So, begiluyim, you could actually change your style, but nevertheless, and it's possible that when you do change, it won't be revealed. A certain person who has a style and tries to use a different style, as if he would have said it with his own natural words. That's what's going on here. Yeah. Because though he could actually do it, tamper with it and so-called play with it, but it doesn't ultimately express the concept as much as it would have been with his own words. You see this sometimes. You do see this. People who have a certain style, and sometimes they have to change it for whatever reason, and there'll be some compromise. Nevertheless, it's not impossible. And he could say the idea in other words. So the qualification of this parentheses is saying two things. He qualified, he said, we just said that the faculties are connected and can't change. Chesed is chesed, gvura is gvura, the way you think, your mind, the way it works. Levushim can change, meaning the garments that change, that are detached and are concealers. But now we also said now that the letters also are the same. So he said number one is that's also only the source, and he could actually say it differently. Meaning that, and he could say it differently. So even though if he says it differently, it's not going to be quite the same way, but he could say it. He could do it. When it comes, however, to keiches, in other words, it's not going to be so easy for him because the aces are also aligned, but he could do it. Whereas when it comes to seichel, that's only in the words he uses. But the brain power itself, the way he conceives of ideas, not how he expresses them, that he cannot change.
Can't you train your mind from a mentor?
Can you become from chesed of Hillel to gvura Shammai? I would say no. It's like your brain is shaped a certain way.
Didn't you want to say you want to teach people how to think the right way, not to
think or brain power? Think is machshava. No, machshava or seichel. It's not the same thing. You're talking about machshava, how to think, not the brain power. Trust me, we don't even get close to our brain power. It's all everything's screwed up is in machshava divrei ma'aseh. We don't even know what our faculties are like in their pure form because they've been shaped and conditioned by and programmed by not necessarily healthy people. That's the problem. So let's get the first thing clear. If you were able to detach and say, okay, I wonder how I was trained and what my pure brain power is, that's the first thing. That's not so easy to determine. Because how much of how we think is based on all the factors. Take Mashiach as an example. Really thinking about it clearly. Look, I would say a good mind is two things. There's a good mind, there are people with powerful mind, but there's also a clear mind. A person who's able to not let things that may have shaped me affect. But also another thing, like I know, I grew up in a community, you grew up in a community, some of us were very much programmed by it, and some of us at least can say, maybe this is part of my programming, maybe not. Even if you can say that, you're already getting to a clearer place. Because how much of it is shaped by other factors, and you think, like some people say, I know for sure this is the way it is. How do you know? Because your parents told you when you were a baby? And I'm not getting down to amun and not amun, I'm just talking how many things that we are so convinced of are not necessarily having to do with seichel. It's complete programming. So, even to be able to do that and separate, okay, it's like sifting and saying, okay, this is what I know for sure, this is what I'm not sure,
Stepping out of your step.
So what he's saying now is personality. This is like changing the color of your eyes. You can't change the color of, you can't change your stripes. Why? That's why he went to fast. That's a big thing. Because he wanted to have a different method of learning Talmud Yerushalmi, not just Talmud Bavli. I wouldn't say he changed his seichel, but you see, even to change his style took him. Right, that's how hard it was. Because approach is a very big thing. They say by the time we're age 7, they say you already have developed your patterns. They're not fully developed, but they say it's already been shaped mostly. So Rabbi Zayda is the amazing story. First of all, that he should want to do it and should be able to. What kind of effort that is? That means he didn't go change his bad habits. He went to take a seichel that worked completely well in Bavli and to find out another methodology. But that, I would say, is also levushim, also an asis, in style, maybe, not so much asis. Shebim haya maskal gam ken kamei hazulas hari haya b'dei achasite.
And it says in the same Shabbos.
Right. So, Hashem is saying, because if he could conceive like another person, he would be of the same opinion. You see, Beis Shammai can sometimes, who's stringent gvura, be mekel, be lenient. That's because of his kalos. That's already because chesed and gvura speak to each other. Not because he changed his mind. Not because his personality changed. In certain situations, he goes back. Remember, the Eir, in its source, is more amorphous. So that's why he can become more lenient. Wow. This is all, by the way, goes back again to the beginning of the Hemshech. It's literally a continuation. Because he's talking about faculties and levushim. And we see this in actuality. And we see in actuality that the faculties are united with and reveal the spirit. Yeah, you see it. Of course you see it. You see because your faculties are an expression of you. They're not outside factors. And the levushim, by contrast, obviously are going to be outer expressions. Kitzur, let's do the kitzur. Like the same thing in the nefesh, in the spirit. The same thing like you said before, that there's faculties in the guf. There's the body and there's the outer garments attached. The garments of thought, speech, and action conceal on the energy. That's manifest in them. And through that they reveal. Okay, he's clarifying, because they're not complete. They're not locked boxes. However, the faculties of mind and heart, emotions, they're also garments. They're garments compared to the core soul. But they're united, and their role is only to reveal. That's why you can change letters. That's what is the last parentheses. And the letters of each person come from the core soul. They're not according to the seichel. In other words, they are not based on the seichel. They come from the core soul. That's the parentheses. Even though you can say different, but from seichel itself you could use different words, like you just said. Mashenkin, haseichel ef shalahachlif. Whereas the seichel itself you cannot change. You can maybe seichel and nefesh l'kiz v'nefesh habamis, like the animal, like the intelligence of the divine soul and the animal soul. And according to the root of the spirit in the chesed and gvura, that's how the seichel, the faculties, function. We'll stop here. We did chapter 105, page 202 to 204.